Hi, Cori.
I'm really happy that you're joining me here for this fun moment because I'm really excited to talk to you about our friendship and how much you mean to me and the process that I feel like we've been through together over many years now as friends, kind of learning on the path of social justice in our personal lives and in the bigger world too.
Yay. Well, I'm super excited to be here. I'm excited for you to share a little bit more about, feminist friendship and give me a little overview of that.
Yeah, as one who knows the most about feminist friendship at this point in time in my life, I'm happy to do a quick overview of what feminist friendship is. I've been thinking about feminist friendship for like 8 years or something and have yet to formally spell out what it is in an exhaustive fashion. But the general sense is that it's about building relationships across difference that have a true sense of understanding and connection and intimacy out of a kind of knowing and appreciation of sharing our actual experiences so that we are familiar enough to be able to actually support one another in ways that are meaningful for our own situations, experiences. And with that, it's a political practice too, because of the things that we navigate in systems and structures based on our different identities, the stuff that comes up for us. It's important for us to be able to know how to show up for one another with care and love and support. But I also think too, just because we are so frequently disconnected and separated from one another in ways that make us feel uncomfortable or, even like sometimes threatened or unsure about how to be close to people, that the very practice of building close relationships itself is something that I consider a liberatory practice as well. So we can grow out of that, but the connection itself is also very important. It matters on its own. So I wrote you a letter to capture a little bit about our friendship and put down in some words what you mean to me and the things that stand out as I think about our friendship. If I cry, there's tissues on the floor. Okay. Dear Chrissy, when I think about you and how our friendship has grown over the past 7 years, since we first crossed paths, we were as presenters and strangers at Ignite Fort Collins. There are places, scenes, and spaces that come to mind. So that stage at the Lincoln Center, one of the most tense speaking experiences of my life, when I was sweating the most stressy sweat and speaking way too fast. And I remember watching you, I think in our rehearsal, and then, but really especially afterwards, the vivid memory is connecting in the hallway and being really glad and grateful to know that someone like you was doing good work to support kiddos to feel strong and healthy in their bodies. And I'm not sure what happened next, but most of the other scenes are at Colorado State University. Like crossing paths again in the Social Justice Leadership Institute, because there you were. And then I remember one day when I think we really met, or at least when I felt like you really met me, was when we found ourselves in the office of a mutual friend and colleague. Do you remember this?
Tortilla chip story.
I was eating tortilla chips and being my fully animated self retelling what happened the night before with a mouse encounter in my basement apartment. And now you know that I can give a talk and I can give a presentation, but I'm the most me when I'm telling my stories. And on that tortilla chip day, I think I felt a new kind of connection with you because you were laughing. And so I don't know if I've ever explicitly told you this before, but one of the most heartwarming and affirming ways that you show up for me as a friend was revealed that day because you actually laugh at and humor my ridiculous and outrageous stories without a sense of being appalled or at all judgy. So thank you. I don't know how we got into the feminist friendship spaces. I think I do. I think you attended one of the talks I did, right? But I have told you many times before just how incredibly important and unique your support has been. So once you learned about my project of feminist friendship, you were the person to encourage me to write about it, to get it out in ways so that it could be shared with others. But then you went beyond that and you had us meet up for actual writing sessions. You got my butt in a chair on a regular basis, and even though I don't think we ever really wrote anything substantive about feminist friendship and our connection or relationship, it wasn't for a lack of believing in it. You always believed in me and my concepts and ideas and practices in ways that sometimes surprise me. But you've been that friend that encourages me because you believe it's valuable and important work when I could doubt and question it. And so all those nights when we met up at a Starbucks halfway between our houses or an old town cafe and didn't write, it was because we were talking, like really talking real talks. They were definitely happening, which of course we realized that that was how we were actually practicing feminist friendship more than just writing about it. So I've appreciated your ongoing support about getting feminist friendship out in front of others, like how you and I presented at our diversity symposium on feminist friendship at work in front of colleagues and administrators, and even now how you've been willing and supportive of highlighting our own friendship through this little project. Even though I tend to be meta about everything, it's not just that you have participated and facilitated so many spaces for us to talk about feminist friendship. I really feel like you're someone who has taken it on in your own life with me, but with others too. I see you doing that work, and it's so, so inspiring. I've consistently been in awe of your willingness to lean into hard conversations with accountability. And from the time at CSU when I was launching the Feminist Fight Club and said, if there are any messy dynamics between us in this room, it's on us to address them so they don't get in the way of us being able to support each other. And then you went and did that on your own and had a conversation with another person. And of course, there are messy dynamics, people are messy and complicated, but the fact that you've been so openly embracing the practices of acknowledging and holding space for those aspects of ourselves and our relationships is undoubtedly one of the reasons I feel so comfortable being honest with you about all of my messy. You've been one to role model and affirm for me that we can meet each other just as we are when we're willing to do that. And again, this is why you've been one to embody and practice feminist friendship. When Maria Lagones and Elizabeth Spellman piqued my curiosity about what I call feminist friendship back in 1983, and they said it wasn't likely possible, you've helped me really believe that it is possible because of how you show up with others and how you show up with me. Yeah. You bring so much to the table that's different and new to me, like appreciative inquiry and motivational interviewing, which you introduced me to. You've explored more about transformative justice. You know 1 billion times more than me about powerlifting and being a parent and being married. I see you navigate the world of public health, community engagement, applying equity in your advocacy with grace and so much humility. And I see the things you don't do for recognition. There's probably stuff I don't see too. Like donating money and writing grants to get money for our BIPOC community. It's been really wonderful to observe and watch you learn, grow, integrate, adjust, and practice through your own path. And now it's just been such an incredible pleasure and gift to share this experience of learning through the Embodied Social Justice Certificate Program with you. By coincidence or happenstance, I'm so, so grateful that we've been able to process and discuss some of the material together. I was intentionally setting out to push myself out of my comfort zones when I registered for the course, but the Zooming with hundreds of people and being on a schedule of live sessions just quickly was not likely for my introverted self. But I'm so happy we learned that we both signed up for this course. Our phone calls and talks on walks about social justice, what's landing for us, in us, and how, is a natural extension of the vast majority of ways we've connected and become friends thus far. It's a little surprising maybe that we haven't really hung out, except for a couple of times, because our friendship, upon reflection, has really been the product of us spending time we've both dedicated to our work around how to do the work to the best of our abilities. So really then it's been such an amazing demonstration, manifestation, and experience of feminist friendship in process and development through lots of talks and many walks. I feel so completely comfortable, seen and appreciated by you, which is grounded in and by the work we do with others, but especially with and for one another's as friends. So thank you so much, Chrissy, for being a person who is so genuine, committed, gracious, vulnerable, and generous in our friendship. Your love and support has always meant so much to me. I would not be here in the way I am, doing what I think and believe I can, without you reflecting so much that is valuable and worthy back to me. I love you, I appreciate you, and I thank you for your friendship, always.
I just need to take a second and let
Yeah.
that just wash over me.
Thank you.
There are a lot of like similarities.
Cool.
I think you just had an extra layer of detail, so that works great. All right, shall I go?
Yes.
I started mine with a quote,
Okay.
which you're very familiar with. It's Gloria Anzaldúa. To become more intimate with myself and you. Dear Cori, it's a drawing near, like a physical feeling of being drawn from the first time we encountered each other on the Ignite stage
Yeah.
at the Lincoln Center in Fort Collins. This sounds like the beginnings of a love letter, and in many ways, that's just what this is. Back to that feeling of being drawn. What I didn't realize then, that I absolutely know now, is that that was the universe trying to pull us together or draw us near over these years. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't sure what to make of you when I first encountered you. All I knew was that you used really complex words like epistemological that I'd used to have to go back and look up. I remember attending various talks that you were giving, one of which was, I believe, in the philosophy department. And I recall calling right afterward and saying, I think I understood about 50 to 60% of what she said.
Yikes.
And yet, we just kept coming across each other. Whether it was more formally at talks or workshops, or more spontaneously, like the time we ran into each other on the Oval. Regardless, I wholeheartedly believe it was the universe trying to tell us that we had something to teach each other and some things to learn from each other. As I reflect on what those teachings and learnings are, something that comes to mind for me that it's both in the content as well as in the process. It's both the what and the how. How meta. Through the process of engaging with you, of holding space for each other, of supporting one another's growth, endeavors, projects, etc., I see now that this has been the embodiment of feminist friendship. I think about the ways that you so lovingly challenge and support me, my learning, my growth. You have a way of creating that sense of safety and belonging that we know from our course is such a necessary prerequisite for true embodied social justice. You have a way of challenging my conceptions within a space where I feel both held and healed. And I deeply appreciate the way we can grapple with some of these nuanced topics and concepts in ways where we both leave feeling nourished. Spending time with you always feels like a movement or a shift toward comfort. That comfort that allows the work to continue, that allows me to engage from a place of embodying authenticity and truth and wholeness. And I'll end this with so much gratitude for the nourishment, the healing, the space, the intimacy, the friendship, the feminist friendship. So, thank you.
That's lovely. I am so grateful for, I like the way you talk about like how many times we're like, we find each other and just keep crossing paths, because that really is what it feels like. Since we don't have the kind of friendship where it's like buddies attached at the hip gonna go like do things together, but just showing up in the same spaces and kind of continually like being present in each other's lives. I feel like that's why it's so unique with you. Like, I have lots of friends, but you're the person I've talked with the most about feminist friendship. Again, like I said in my letter, in a way where I feel like you get it, because we've literally like spelled it out many times, but also the actual doing of our conversations. We've talked about so many things in so many different ways that are personal, but then also that become kind of conceptual and theoretical to frame up what's happening in our lives. I always don't know what to do with the fact that people say they don't understand what I'm saying 50% of the time. But maybe it's the affect then that needs to carry through, like it's a felt sense.
That one was the philosophy. I can't remember.
It was the
which
existentialist one, wasn't it? That was the one people never got. Existential freedom and ethics of freedom. Well, that or the positive philosophy one, who knows?
The former.
Yeah. Still one of the most important lectures of my life, though, honestly.
So this is what I mean is I should go back now. I wonder how much more of it I could
I don't know.
grasp.
But regardless, I really feel so utterly comfortable with you, and that I learn a lot from you in terms of the way that you respond to me, because sometimes I'm not the most like present person, and if I were to pay attention to my body, it'd be like I'm really activated right now. There's a lot going on. But you do such a good job of just really holding the space to make that really, like, the reflections back are what you do so well. I think it's a critical skill to not have the imposition of like trying to say what's going on. I think that's why it never feels judgy whenever I can say pretty much anything to you, and you'll just be like, oh, that seems, you know. But and it's funny because those reflections are not deflections. That's not how it feels. It instead feels like inviting, as Ansel Dua's quote says, like, right, the opportunity for us to like become more intimate with ourselves and each other in the process. So even though we've been like work friends and workshop friends and now like certificate program friends, it's amazing how through all of that there's a level of depth and intimacy that I think maybe it's just because we don't hang out, we go deep instead. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about that notion of that we're like friends in these unique spaces, and yet there's also this level of like deeply feeling seen, right? And so it's not only that we get together and process, right, and talk about social justice kinds of things. There's also, which I think is part of that safety and sense of belonging that is created in our space together that feels so important in order to grapple with some of the other things.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is such a unique piece of this is we aren't just processing what we're learning, right? There's a level of deeply knowing one another and being seen by each other that facilitates some of the other nuanced conversations that we get to have.
Yeah. It's we don't just talk about social justice because otherwise we're like research friends. I don't know. But it's like, I think that becomes a social justice in practice because we can talk about relationships, we can talk about family, we can talk about our own personal experiences or struggles with how we feel about ourselves. And those are the things that I think reflect oppressive or problematic dynamics materially, like how they show up in our lives. But the actual social justice then comes through the relationship of being able to really be open and honest with those things, not have shame, not have fear about naming the things that are complicated. So it's less about, let's talk about social justice, but it's the social justice comes through, I think, in our relationship because we've facilitated the space to be able to have real, heartfelt, genuine, authentic conversations about some of the really difficult things that otherwise are the stuff that will keep us separated from each other because we want to protect ourselves or because we feel vulnerable. Naming those things. I know when we were not writing about feminist friendship and I was just talking too much, I was going through some shit that was complicated for me. And you were one of the few people I talked really openly about that, like without even really knowing you that well. And that to me is a testament because and that's part of the reason why I think feminist friendship is so important, because it's in our relationships when we can build the closeness and that proximity of intimacy as the counter to the forces that usually keep us apart and separate. Alienated then because we don't feel like we're fully seen. Insecure because we don't feel like we can trust that someone's going to be there for us with a sense of safety. So in the course, safety, belonging, dignity, like those are basic things that we need that are the roots of justice, the roots of liberation. And I feel like so much of that can be thought about individually. It can be put into practice in our projects. But it also, I think, really is fertile in our relationships with other humans who can be complicated and messy and hurt and healing. And being in that space together is where I think there's just so much potential for transformation that, like, you've been one to, like, really affirm for me because of our relationship.
And it's, this piece around being able to then avoid the performativity that so often happens in relationships, because that sense of deep safety and belonging is there, then that, I think, allows me to engage in a different way, in a deeper, more whole, more truthful way than, again, I think that's sometimes when you see a lot of performative, in terms of how it typically is talked about, performative actions, because that sense of real safety and belonging that foundation hasn't been laid.
Yeah. I'm realizing, as you're saying that, we've acknowledged before that, like, we are not so different, you and I. Like, and so there is still the challenge of, like, true feminist friendship working across difference to build that level of intimate connection where we can be honest about the things that we're kind of messing up, or the stuff that's actually a challenge for us that other people have no clue about, to build that bridge for understanding. It's hard when we're further apart from one another in light of our differences. You and I, if by sheer proximity apparently, I think had that facilitated for us to have more closeness because we're in similar spaces and we're doing similar work. So that's a caveat I'm thinking of. I don't think it in any way diminishes our friendship, but I still think that there's something to take away from that, because people who are in the same community, in the same family, who have all the same backgrounds, still frequently don't have the ability or the, like, I don't know, relationship to have that level of trust and communication to really be seen. So thinking of it more on that spectrum of, if we can't connect with the people who share so many of our experiences and identities in a way where we can, like, really be honest and support each other in that truth, where we can grow, where we can heal, and what we do, then of course it's going to be really, really hard to do that across other differences of, like, race and class and ability and, culture. But I still think it's possible. One of the things that I think also is special about you is that a major hurdle for feminist friendship being possible is the skills that we don't have to facilitate that kind of connection. And that's what I mean. Like, you show up with so many skills of just, like, the openness and that genuineness that feels very caring, that I think is what has made it so easy, in my experience, to have that level of connection with you. Again, we don't have to be best friends for a lifetime in order to be able to have a more intimate kind of connection. You come with those skills.
I think about, it was in one of the community connection sessions, there was a conversation about as a white-bodied person showing up with, in that space it was named as sort of a hypervigilance in spaces. And there was a really good conversation about it. I think about, in my relationships where there are more differences, something that feels really important is not necessarily sort of this hypervigilance around what am I saying, what am I, right? But more so a discernment, right? To think about, how do I engage in a way that is there is a lot of listening, right? That is a piece, that you've talked a little bit about. But to me, it feels like discernment is an important component of this, particularly when you're engaging in relationships where there are more differences.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Listening, discernment. I think also self-reflection, though, like that, and that is probably a part of discernment, to be able to know where one's coming from and what's happening. I don't know if there have been things between us where if I've said or done something that you're like, you, yikes, Cori, in a way that provided an opportunity for you to be like, what's happening in me to have this reaction? I don't know, maybe that has happened. Yeah. Could be. But I do feel like, now that I'm saying that, like something unique about us and our dynamic has been more what I feel like is like we get to show up as each other in front of one another instead of I'm experiencing someone and then it's making me have a reaction that I need to like analyze and reflect on about what's happening in me. Maybe that is because we come from similar spaces and it's less about the difference of like, I'm not super uncomfortable around you. You don't do things that make me uncomfortable. But I think that discernment is probably part of the other side of like non-judgment too, even though that might seem contradictory. I feel like you just have always had such a strong presence, like attention and presence, that to me has facilitated the connection.
Yeah, one of the things that I think has come up a few times in the course is this notion of the pause or silence. And I used to be really uncomfortable with silences, but I think silence is such a powerful tool that can be used to communicate non-verbally, that I trust that, if I'm giving you more space or more silence or vice versa, that it's about trusting that you're working through something and it's sort of this gift, right? To say, I've got as much time as we need to work through some of these things. And so that notion of silence is another one that feels really important. And that ties to like sense of urgency, right? As sort of a counter to that. But the pause and the silence, I think, is an important piece of the puzzle or of the process.
I'm thinking of that scene in Bridesmaids when Kristen Wiig is like, we can communicate with just a look, we don't have to say it out loud. But I'm thinking too, not just in a dialogue, also the context of a larger friendship, that there are spaces in between. There's so many spaces in between when you and I actually have had these kinds of interactions. Lately with the course, it's been a near weekly process, which has been lovely, but we don't talk on a weekly basis all the time and jump on the phone or take a walk to catch up and talk about things. So even that space in between when we get to connect, to me that feels really special because it's like there's a strength of our relationship or a friendship that doesn't go anywhere. I mean, people talk about it all the time. It's like you could pick up 10 years later and no time has passed. But more importantly, I feel like there's this space for us to be living, growing, healing. And then when we reconnect, we get to meet each other where we're at now.
Yeah.
Well, Chrissy, thank you so much. This has been, going through the Embodied Social Justice Certificate Program truly would not have been the same without you as a peer, friend, colleague to process with. But that additional layer of being able to process it with you in a way that I feel like actually deepens our own friendship is truly, truly the unexpected gift of the course that I had no idea when I was registering that it would be such an opportunity to just continue deepening this between us.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think about the learning that has happened on top of the learning that happened in the course. And not just like the head learning, right? But then feeling into that in those times with you, right? It was just another opportunity to practice being embodied. And it just landed so much more deeply in me because we had that opportunity to process it with each other.
Well, I'm excited because that's going to continue, I'm sure.
Yes.
We'll take it forward in all the next things that we do. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you
I
for
love
my
you so
letter.
much.
There's yours.
Mhm.
I love you,
Yeah.
friend.
Okay.